My name's Nate Riley, and I never thought the loudest thing in my life would be my neighbor's imagination. Not my dog, not my TV, not my lawnmower. Her imagination. Because somehow, in her head, my golden retriever became a 24/7 howling menace, a neighborhood-wide crisis, a threat to property values, public health, and probably national security if you asked her at the right hour. And the wild part is, she almost won. She almost got me fined, almost got my dog labeled dangerous, almost got my family trained to flinch every time a doorbell rang. All because she decided my street was her kingdom and my front porch was the border. So yeah, I installed a motion-activated air horn. Not because I'm a villain, not because I love chaos. I did it because after the third official complaint about barking at 2:12 a.m. while my dog was drooling on my pillow, I realized something simple. If you let someone rewrite reality long enough, they'll hand it to the HOA like it's evidence. And if you're the quiet one, the polite one, the one who thinks this will blow over, you're the one who gets steamrolled. So I stopped being quiet. It started with a sticky note, bright pink, stuck dead center on my front door like a badge. I remember it because it looked almost friendly, like a kid's art project, except the message was written in thick black marker with the kind of confidence that makes your jaw tighten. Please be considerate. Excessive dog barking is disruptive. No signature at first, just that sentence, like it was a public service announcement. I peeled it off and turned around, and there's my dog, Moose, sprawled out on the rug like a melted loaf of bread. Moose isn't an aggressive dog. He's not even an alpha dog. He's the kind of dog that gets bullied by butterflies. He barked sometimes, sure. He'd bark if a delivery guy walked too close, or if a squirrel sprinted across the fence line like it owed him money. Normal dog stuff. Suburb stuff. I crumpled the note, tossed it, and told my wife, Lila, we've got ourselves a very sensitive neighbor. We laughed. That was mistake number one. Because the notes didn't stop. They multiplied. Every few days there'd be another one. Different color, same tone, like someone was building a scrapbook of annoyance. Your dog's incessant barking is causing undue stress. This is impacting my sleep and my health. Have you considered professional training? And then, finally, a signature that made me exhale through my nose so hard it should have counted as cardio. Sincerely, Marlene, 18, Hawthorne Lane. Marlene. I didn't know her name yet, but I knew the type. The neighbor who treats the street like a stage and everyone else like unpaid extras. I'd seen her once or twice. Always outside, always busy, always scanning. Perfect hair, perfect posture, and a stare that could sand wood. She had a yard so manicured it looked like it was scared to grow the wrong direction. At first, I tried to be the grown-up. I bought Moose a couple new chew toys. I adjusted his routine. Took him on longer walks so he'd be tired. I even spent an embarrassing amount of time Googling how much barking is normal, like there was a federal chart somewhere. Moose was fine. The situation was not. Because the sticky notes turned into printed forms. Official-looking forms. From the Neighborhood Association. The Brookstone Ridge Community Association, which is a name that sounds like it should come with a free welcome cookie and a smile. Instead it came with checkboxes and timestamps. Excessive barking, 2:12 a.m. Disturbing the peace, 5:47 a.m. Ongoing nuisance, 11:34 p.m. I stared at those times like they were typos. Moose sleeps in our bedroom. He's a big, warm, snoring space heater. If he barked at 2:12 a.m., I'd know. Lila would know. The entire house would know. But the forms kept showing up, and every single one was signed by Marlene like she was clocking in for her shift. Then came the first police visit. Early evening, right when we're trying to get dinner on the table. Knock at the door, calm, professional. Officer Ramirez. Nice guy, tired eyes. The kind of face that says he's seen every version of neighbor drama known to mankind. He looks past me, sees Moose wagging his tail like he's auditioning for a family movie, and Officer Ramirez goes, well, he seems quiet now. I explained the notes. The HOA forms. The weird hours. He listened, nodded, and said, sometimes people get a little enthusiastic about the rules. He promised he'd talk to her. And for a moment, I thought, okay, a reasonable adult is involved. This will end. That was mistake number two. Because the visits continued. Every time, Moose would be asleep, or chewing a toy, or sitting politely like a dog who's never committed a crime in his entire life. Officer Ramirez would apologize, tell me he had to respond to every call, and then he'd leave looking more annoyed each time. Then one night, he showed up holding his phone like it was a trophy. She provided a recording, he said, and played it. It sounded like a dog barking, sure, but it was distorted, echoey, like it was recorded through a wall, across a street, inside a microwave. I listened and said, "Officer, that could be any dog." He shrugged, almost embarrassed. "I know." Then he lowered his voice and said, "Just keep your documentation, in case this turns into a thing." That sentence landed heavy, because it already was a thing. He just didn't want to say it out loud. The real turning point came at 3:06 a.m. That's the time burned into my brain, because it's when the doorbell started screaming. Not one polite ring. Repeated, aggressive, like someone wanted the neighborhood to wake up and witness me being dragged into disgrace. Lila jolts upright. Moose lifts his head, confused, not barking, just confused. Then there's pounding on the door and a voice outside, sharp, loud. "Police. Open up." My stomach dropped, because that wasn't Ramirez. That was two new officers, straight-faced, procedural, the kind of energy that says, "We're here to write something." I opened the door in sweatpants, half asleep, heart racing. One of them says, "We received a complaint of excessive barking." I blinked at him like he'd told me the moon was missing. I said, "My dog has been asleep all night." He nodded, like he'd heard that line before, and said, "Sir, we have to follow protocol. If the complainant is still being disturbed, we may have to issue a citation." Lila steps into view holding Moose by the collar. Moose yawns like he's bored by the entire concept of crime. I said, "She's the one disturbing the peace. This is harassment." The officer's face didn't change. "Maybe try to resolve it amicably," he said. And I swear, if you've ever heard that phrase from someone who's about to leave you in the mess, you know exactly how it feels. Amicably. Like I'm supposed to bake cookies for the woman trying to get my dog taken away. When they left, I didn't go back to sleep. I sat at the kitchen table staring at my phone, the HOA forms, the notes. My anger wasn't even hot anymore. It was focused, cold, and somewhere under the frustration, a little spark of humor flickered. Because the whole situation was ridiculous. Like a bad sitcom where the villain is a lady with a clipboard. And that spark turned into a thought I couldn't shake. If Marlene wanted to weaponize noise, fine. I'd introduce her to noise. But on my terms. In the morning, I did what any reasonable adult does after being woken up by the police at 3 a.m. I went to my garage and started plotting. I'm not a full-time engineer or anything, but I tinker. I build little home automation projects for fun. Motion lights, smart locks, camera triggers, stuff that makes my wife roll her eyes and say, "Please don't turn the house into a spaceship." So I opened my laptop, took a sip of coffee that tasted like revenge, and started researching two things: motion sensors and air horns. I didn't want to mess with the whole neighborhood. I didn't want to punish kids walking by, or delivery drivers, or squirrels. I wanted a system that only triggered when someone came onto my property with the kind of energy that says, "I'm here to supervise your existence." So I built a small perimeter zone just inside my walkway. Not on the sidewalk. Not on the street. On my property. I mounted a motion sensor low and angled it like a bouncer. Then I wired it to a relay connected to a weatherproof Airhorn module I hid in a fake garden light casing. I'm not proud of how much time I spent making it look normal. I didn't want it to scream trap. I wanted it to sit there politely and then ruin Marlene's morning. And because I'm petty in a very specific way, I added a speaker. A cheap little outdoor speaker. I recorded a calm, overly professional voice line, like a customer service hotline. "Attention. Visitor detected. Please step back from private property." Simple. Neutral. No names. No insults. Just the sound of someone being told no by a machine. Then, and this part makes me laugh even now, I gave the air horn a half-second delay. That way the voice plays, and then the horn hits, like punctuation. Testing it was a mess. I walked back and forth in my driveway like a weird fitness routine. Moose watched me like I'd lost my mind. Lila stood in the doorway with her arms crossed and said, "If this backfires, I'm telling everyone I don't know you." But after a few tweaks, adjusting sensitivity, narrowing the trigger zone, making sure it didn't go off for cars or pedestrians, it was perfect. Not loud enough to be a neighborhood siren, but loud enough to make a grown adult reconsider trespassing. I sat on my porch that afternoon with an iced tea, waiting like I was watching a nature documentary. And right on schedule, here comes Marlene. She marched up my driveway holding a folder. Not a note. A folder. Like she was about to deliver a court summons. Shoulders squared, chin up, expression locked in that look people get when they believe they're doing society a favor by being miserable. She crossed the invisible line into my trigger zone, and the system woke up. The speaker chirped, calm and polite. Attention. Visitor detected. Please step back from private property. Marlene froze for half a beat. Confused. Then the air horn fired. Not a long blast. Just a sharp, obnoxious honk that echoed off the houses like a goose with a grudge. Marlene jumped so hard she actually squeaked. I'm not making that up. A squeak. Like a rubber toy. She looked around, furious, trying to find the source. Took one more step forward. The voice again, then another blast. She covered her ears. Took a step back, silence. Took a step forward, voice, blast. It was like watching someone play a very stupid game of hot and cold, except the prize was humiliation. She did it 3 times before she realized the pattern. And then she did what people like her always do when they lose control. She turned her anger into performance. She spun toward my porch and shouted, "Nathan Riley, what is this?" I stood up slowly, like I had all the time in the world. "Oh, hey Marlene," I said casual. "Can I help you?" Her face was red. "Your device is harassing me." She pointed at the garden light like it had personally offended her ancestors. I raised my eyebrows. "It's a security deterrent," I said. "It triggers when someone enters my property without being invited." She sputtered, "I'm your neighbor." I nodded. "Right. And you're on my property. Uninvited." She said, "I need to discuss your barking dog." I looked down at Moose, who was lying behind me chewing a toy, silent. Then I looked back at her and said, "You can discuss it from the sidewalk." She took one step closer out of pure spite. The horn blasted again. Her whole body flinched. I couldn't help it, I laughed. Not a big laugh. Just a small, sharp laugh that said, "You did this to yourself." She stormed away like she was marching off to file a declaration of war. And honestly, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. For the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was controlling my own space. But I also knew, deep down, Marlene wasn't done. People like her don't retreat. They regroup. Sure enough, 3 days later, I got an email from the Brookstone Ridge Community Association. Subject line: formal hearing, noise and nuisance complaint. They wanted me to appear at a board meeting to address reports of disruptive noise and potential harassment of a resident. I laughed out loud. Lila didn't laugh. She said, "Nate, please don't turn this into a TikTok." I promised I wouldn't. I lied a little, but I did show up prepared. The meeting was in a community clubhouse that smelled like carpet cleaner and passive aggression. Folding chairs. A long table up front. A board president named Dennis Klein, who looked like he'd been born holding a rule book. 2 other board members, one of them trying not to smile because she'd clearly heard about the air horn already. And Marlene, sitting in the front row like a plaintiff in a courtroom drama, clutching a binder so thick it could stop a bullet. Dennis started with the usual tone. "We're here to maintain community harmony," he said. And I had to bite my tongue to not make a joke about harmony being code for "do what Marlene wants." Marlene spoke first. Of course she did. She launched into a speech about sleepless nights, stress, property values, and unreasonable intimidation tactics. Then she played her audio recording again. The board members nodded like they were listening to evidence in a trial. When she finished, Dennis looked at me like a disappointed teacher. "Mr. Riley," he said, "how do you respond?" I stood up, smiled politely, and said, "I respond with facts." Then I plugged in a little USB drive. Here's what I brought: security footage. Not of Moose barking. Of Marlene. On my property. Multiple times. Pacing along my fence line. Peering toward my windows. Walking up my driveway at odd hours holding notes and folders. One clip showed her standing on the sidewalk at 2:10 a.m. recording toward my house, then typing on her phone. 2 minutes later, there's an HOA complaint timestamped 2:12 a.m. Another clip showed her trying to open my side gate, stopping when it didn't budge, then walking away like she was offended the gate didn't recognize her authority. The room changed. You could feel it. That moment when people realize they've been fed a story and the story doesn't match the footage. Marlene's face went pale, then bright red. "That's out of context," she snapped. I shrugged. "Okay," I said. Let's watch the full context. And I played more. I didn't edit it dramatically. I didn't need to. The truth was dramatic all by itself. Dennis cleared his throat, suddenly very interested in his paperwork. One board member tried to hide a grin. Marlene started talking fast, tripping over her own explanations. I was just making sure the rules were being followed, she said. I leaned forward a little, friendly voice, and said, "So you admit you were monitoring me?" That sentence landed like a brick, because it didn't matter how she justified it. She just admitted the thing she'd been denying. Dennis looked at me and said, "And the Airhorn system?" I kept it simple. "It's a motion-activated deterrent on my property," I said. "It activates when someone enters the zone. It doesn't target the street. It doesn't target passers-by. It targets trespass." Marlene shouted, "It targets me." I nodded slowly. "Only when you come onto my property." Silence. Glorious silence. The board stepped out for 5 minutes. When they came back, Dennis's voice was stiff. "We're issuing a warning to Mrs. Vance," he said. "Yeah, Marlene Vance." I didn't even know her last name until that moment. "Regarding repeated unwanted contact and entry onto a neighbor's property, as well as filing complaints without reliable verification." Then he turned to me and said, "Mr. Riley, we ask that you ensure your security system complies with local noise ordinances." I said, "Absolutely. And here's the thing, I meant it. I wasn't trying to terrorize the neighborhood. I was trying to stop one person from terrorizing my family." Marlene stood up so fast her chair scraped. She stared at me like she'd just realized I wasn't going to be the easy target she picked. She hissed, "This isn't over." I smiled, not because I wanted a fight, but because I finally understood the game. "I agree," I said. "It's not." She stormed out of the room, binder clutched like a weapon, and for the first time since all this started, I felt like I could breathe. Now, you'd think that's where the story ends. HOA warning, Karen humbled, everybody laughs, credits roll. But here's the part that's still messy. For about 2 weeks, things were quiet. No notes, no cops, no complaints. Then one afternoon, I noticed Marlene standing across the street talking to another neighbor, pointing toward my house, shaking her head like she was narrating a tragedy. And later that night, I got a new HOA email, not a complaint, not a hearing. A reminder. Review of security devices and exterior modifications will be conducted next quarter. No name, no accusation, just a heads up that felt like a threat wrapped in polite words. Lila read it and said, "They're going to try a different angle." And I stared at that email thinking, maybe Marlene didn't lose. Maybe she just learned how to fight smarter. So let me ask you, because I want the comments to be honest, not just cheering for petty revenge. Where's the line between protecting your peace and becoming the problem? If someone keeps poking you, keep lying about you, keep dragging the police to your door at 3 a.m., do you stay polite until they win? Or do you push back hard enough that the whole neighborhood finally sees what's happening? And if you were on that HOA board, watching those clips, would you have called Marlene out? Or would you have still told me to keep things amicable just to avoid conflict? Drop your take down below, because I know I'm not the only one who's dealt with a neighbor who treats rules like weapons. Tell me the most ridiculous complaint you've ever seen, and tell me, was I right for installing the air horn? Or did I cross the line? Hit like if you've ever had to stand up for your home. Subscribe if you want more stories where ordinary people stop being polite and start being unignorable. And yeah, if you've got a Marlene on your street, I want to hear about it.